Welcome to the September 14th, 2018 Eden Prairie City Council meeting. I now call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to make a brief announcement about Open Podium, just an invitation to anyone in the room tonight, but also watching from home. Our City Council has instituted a procedure called Open Podium, which is an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address the City Council on issues related to Eden Prairie City government prior to each regular City Council meeting, typically on the first and third Tuesday of each month, from the 6:30 to 6:55 time frame in the council chamber here. If you wish to speak at Open Podium, please contact the city manager's office at 952-949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, phone number, and subject matter. This will allow our staff to be prepared and ready for the issue that you bring forward. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, the mayor will open the floor to unscheduled speakers. Open Podium is not recorded or televised. If you have any questions about Open Podium, please contact the city manager's office. I believe we have special announcement and an award possibly from the Lions Club tonight. I'm not sure who is coming up to speak. Yes, maybe go ahead and give your name and address, Mr. President.
I'm Gary Watkins, the president of the Eden Prairie Lions Club, 6865 Rosemary Road. I'd like to introduce Mike Gust, our club historian, to explain the award that we are presenting this evening.
Great, thank you and welcome.
Mike Gust, 7280 Prairie View Drive, Eden Prairie.
Thank you.
So this is a special occasion for the members of the Eden Prairie Lions Club tonight. We are honoring a member of our community who has generously devoted time and his ability in efforts that have helped improve the quality of life for all of us. The Melvin Jones Fellow Award. The Melvin Jones Fellow Award is the highest honor Lions Clubs International Foundation can bestow upon an individual. It may be awarded to both Lions and non-Lions, men and women whose life have been characterized by the dedication to serve. Fellows receiving a handsome plaque, the knowledge that he or she is recognized as a true patron of humanity and an individual whose actions and ideals embody the objectives and the spirit of Lionism International. The Fellowship Award is not an award as such. Rather, it is recognition given to a humanitarian. As members of the Eden Prairie Lions Club, we have chosen to show Police Chief Jim DeMann that we appreciate his work by honoring him with the Melvin Jones Fellowship. Police Chief Jim DeMann has provided more than 3 decades of service to our community. He has served as a patrol officer, a SWAT team member, and a K-9 officer, an investigator, as well as position on the command staff. Jim was called upon to serve as the 6th Chief of Police for the City of Eden Prairie on July 1st, 2016. We are grateful for the dedication and the sacrifice that Jim and his family have made for the City of Eden Prairie. The Eden Prairie Lions Club is proud to recognize Police Chief Jim DeMann with the Melvin Jones Fellowship Award. And our Eden Prairie Lions Club President Gary Watkins will present the award to Chief. Thank you.
Speech. JD, got to give a speech, sorry.
So I'm speechless.
We got
It's hard
you.
to give a speech when you don't have any words. This is quite an honor, and I'm very surprised. And I have to say, serving the city for the last 31 years has been a privilege and an honor for me. And I've got a lot of fond memories of it. And I appreciate all the support that we've gotten over the years from the councils that I've had the opportunity to work with, and of course our community. It's a great city, and I've had a great run. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to our Eden Prairie Lions Club as well. Just a great civic organization that 2/3 of the city council at the moment sitting up here happens also to be members. I suppose that's a little disclaimer, but we're very proud of what you all do. And JD, you're the best. We wish you the best. Good luck to you. All right. We also, as part of our, yes, you all, no, you have to sit here through the entire meeting. That's your civic responsibility. Thanks for coming, you guys.
Civic responsibility.
Right. Thank you. Our city has been environmentally conscious, I think, probably since the beginning of our settler history, 1850s. But over the last 10 to 20 years, I think we've done particularly well. And one of the things that the three of us up here are most proud of is our participation in the Minnesota Green Step Cities program. We've been part of it for 7 years, and we have been at the top of the class for most of those years. I believe there's only a handful, under 10 or something, cities that have achieved the top rating, which we have. So I'd like to welcome Diana McEwen of the Great Plains Institute. And she's going to come up and award the city. And if you want to say a few words, and then I'll come down and receive that from you.
Perfect. Thank you. I just really want to say congratulations. The city of Eden Prairie has in fact been one of the leading cities every year of the program. The program began in June of 2010, and I don't remember which year you joined, but pretty soon after, in the last few years after that. And I've been out here a couple times giving a word, I think in the stairwell, Rick, was it at one point with the mayor? Yeah. So I'm very happy to present these awards, and actually it's the 2017 and 2018 Step 5, which is the highest level of the Green Step Cities program. And what that means is that not only are you taking action, but you're measuring that action and trying to figure out the impact that you're having, which is a big part of where we want to go, make sure that we can measure that impact. So very happy to be here to give you this award. It is, I don't know the number exactly, but it's 10 or less. It's not very many that achieve 5. And Step 5 is different than the others. You have to achieve it each year. You have to keep kind of making some progress. So it's not easy to do it a couple years in a row. So this is a really great honor. So I also have a certificate signed by the president of or the executive director of the League of Minnesota Cities from the conference in June, and would love to. I don't know if it's a group or who, for a photo.
It's
and
up
if
to
somebody
whatever,
would
but
take a picture with my phone so I can tweet
like
it.
Sure.
Why not?
We like to do social media, give you the props, the mad props on the Twitter.
And maybe just to note that there's a larger plaque.
Yes.
That these, it's not that you all are cheap or anything. You've given us a big plaque. But these are two sustainable. But these are two small pieces that will go into this larger plaque that we're very proud of.
That's
so
right.
Do you want
and these are
to
wood,
take the one?
wood from the hood, so it's salvaged wood. Yeah. I should hand this to you.
Okay. Sure. That's
Thank
maybe
you.
yes. Maybe we should even shake hands.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So much. Yes,
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Congratulations. Nice to see you, Rick.
Nice to see you. Recycled paper.
I don't think any of us take for granted when we keep winning these awards, but we do win a lot as Eden Prairie. Eden Prairie is in the top of so many different indices, and to have the awards constantly be coming in is just such a great, really it's a great statement for the councils through the years, but the staff, which has led so many of the initiatives that are directed by the council, and of course the people of Eden Prairie to be part of a community that really has grown to expect quality. So thank you to all of you, but this is really a great award to receive. So I believe that's all with the proclamations, correct? And we're down to approval of agenda and other items. Is there a motion for approval? And then we'll see if there's any items to add. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And then anyone have any items to add? Kathy?
No.
Okay, I just have a couple just real quick things. All those in favor then of the, I guess, amended agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, moving to the minutes. Is there a motion? I think Robert's rules allows us to put the two together, but let me ask you, are there any corrections to either one before we put them into one motion?
No.
Is there a motion to approve both the minutes then from the workshop held Tuesday, September 4th, and also the meeting the same night?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Actually, my eye was in there too, but it just didn't hear it. All right. Consent calendar. Is there a motion for approval of items A to I?
Move approval.
Second.
Any items to question? I just want to add a clarification that we are approving a really important amendment to the Fire Relief Association bylaws that contains two parts. And it's been vetted and studied. Where's George? I don't know how many years. A long, long, long time. Tried to go through the legislature and actually had it passed twice, but not signed twice, obviously. It's just passed this year and signed. And the details are in all of our council packet tonight, but basically allowing some flexibility for us to incentivize retirees possibly to take the lump sum. But it's really, we've been waiting on this quite a long time. City's been deeply involved, staff has been deeply involved. I know it's just in the consent calendar, which maybe makes it seem like it's not as big a deal as it is, but I do want everyone to know that it's been vetted quite well. So there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent calendar say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Moving on to payment of claims.
Move approval of payment of claims as submitted.
Second.
Any items to call out or to question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I voted for that one too. I guess I'll have to start not just clarifying. I keep forgetting to say aye.
Call.
Roll call. Oh, I do have to do a roll call. Roll call.
Councilmember Aho,
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
Acting Mayor Case.
Aye. There. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Brad, for the catch. All right. We're down to reports of council members, and I just had a couple quick items. One, and actually Brad, we all got the notice of it, so we're all going to, well, we haven't chatted, but Brad and I briefly before we're talking about this, just curious about an update on the washout of the trail that's the regional bike trail as it enters into Chan from Eden Prairie, and it's been going on. Keep going, I'm sorry. Okay, it's been going on for several years, and I believe our Park and Rec Director is ready to just give an update on this.
Yes, Your Honor, council members, the Hennepin Rail Authority is the owner of that trail. The part that you're referring to is outside of Eden Prairie. There was a great washout with a rainstorm there. They've secured some funding through FEMA. They're still waiting to move forward, likely in 2019 to restore that. So that's likely spring or summer of next year is when they would be working on it.
Okay, thank you. Is that on our website?
It's actually a Three Rivers website.
But I mean, could it be on ours too, just you know, because our residents may not even realize that it's well, they know the trail's Three Rivers, but
Yeah,
Or
Might
at
not
least
realize-
link to the Three Rivers
that
website.
would be good. That would be good.
sure.
Excellent, thank you. And I have one more item before I turn it back over to Mr. Lothammer. So several people, as I was out and about in the city, have talked about the lack of a safe pedestrian crossing across Anderson Lakes Parkway from about where Homeward Hills Road tees in and then across to the school. Now we have a tunnel that goes under that road on the west side, I think, of the school, about maybe 100 feet up from the intersection. But what's happening, I believe I'm hearing correctly, is that people and students from the Waterford Road side of it, the eastern side, try to cross there anyway. I don't know that kids are lazy, but they don't want to walk up to that tunnel. And parents would like to cross there too. I'd like to ask the question about this potential crossing in a bigger context. And because of what we're talking about tonight with Preserve Boulevard, I remember when I was chatting with Nancy, the mayor, about 2 months ago on the Preserve Boulevard project. She talked about we really need to be conscious that that's an entry point into the mall from really all those areas south. And really, if you think about the feeder roads into that, it's Franlow and it's Homeward Hills. And so knowing that those are two major conduits really to get to what the project we're working on tonight, I just kind of would like to know also what long-term plans or might be for some kind of traffic control at that intersection. Or I'm not proposing a three-way stop, but in that context, I think the pedestrian crossing might begin to make sense, especially since there's a school there and there is no crosswalk crossing Anderson Lakes. Granted, there's the tunnel, but it's up to the west. So I'm throwing all that out. Just I don't know, Mr. Getchell, who would be the best to respond to all that.
Councilmember Case, I think I can try to address some of those concerns. So you're correct. There is an underpass that's to the west, and it's actually probably about 350 feet to the west of Homeward Hills. So if you were a student, a child who walks a little bit slower, it's probably a 3.5 to 4 minute walk to go over to the tunnel, pass, and then come back to where you would have crossed at grade. So it is a little bit longer. It is the safest alternative for crossing the road because there are no vehicular conflict points. And for younger children, a road like Anderson Lakes Parkway, that's where I would encourage them to walk, even if it is a little bit further walking distance. You know, of course, kids that live along the Preserve Boulevard neighborhood, they have a traffic signal so they can walk up to the light, cross with a controlled access point and walk in. And, you know, we've been watching this intersection. This week we've been out there 4 times just during arrival dismissal to see, you know, have patterns changed? Is there a new demand? And the weather hasn't been the greatest, but we've had some sunny mornings, some cloudy afternoons, and a little bit of rain. And we failed to see any children crossing during those times. So, you know, just based on that information, that seems pretty consistent with what we've seen there in the past. I would be hesitant to recommend the council actually put in a marked crosswalk because I think that might encourage kids, hey, this is where the adults are telling us we should cross, and I think they should go out of the way to go to the underpass. Having said that, you know, we could reach out to the school district. What is their perspective? I mean, they talk with the students and the parents. Maybe there's a different perspective from them. And they do have crossing guards, of course, at Prairie View Elementary has them for Duck Lake Road. Oak Point has 2 crossing guards, I think one for Starring Lake and one for Anderson Lakes Parkway. This is that type of road that I think if a crosswalk was marked, they'd probably want to have a presence, but they're probably only going to want to see the crosswalk if there's a demand for it too. So I'd like to reach out to them, get their perspective on this. You know, looking down the road, you mentioned stoplight perhaps or some other type of traffic control treatment at this intersection. We don't have anything in the 10-year CIP. We have kicked around internally ideas. You know, actually a few weeks ago, the idea of maybe a roundabout here might be a way to better mitigate some of the traffic issues we see. I don't know, it hasn't been studied, but I think going forward, you know, kind of compounding with, I think, the issue you brought up the other day of shortcutters using Waterford. I think that that's something we could take a closer look at. We're not in any position right now to fund a study or any type of capital improvement, but I think hearing the concerns you're bringing forward, maybe the school district can share some of the thoughts they have. It might be time to take a closer look at something at that intersection. I don't know. But at the time being, I think unless demand changes, patterns for pedestrian changes, I don't know that I would recommend a crosswalk. And I could be mistaken, but I have heard that some years ago, the school district made a decision to bus children that live south of Anderson Lakes Parkway. I don't know if that's still the case, but we could find out. So that might be why there is no, we haven't observed any students crossing. So that's kind of some of the initial feedback I give you tonight.
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea if you wouldn't mind just to make the call, just to get a foundational benchmark from the district that no, we don't see a need at this time, or we might be, potentially seeing a need. That might be a good idea.
There used to be crossing guards at Waterford, crossing at that corner for decades. As I used to live a couple blocks away from it. But yes, they did start busing the kids across Anderson Lakes because the bus would always come down Waterford. But nevertheless, they also had crossing guards. And maybe they've stopped doing that because there weren't many kids crossing there. But it has been with crossing guards with just what's there. So you could talk to them again if there seems to be an issue about whether they want to put those back in.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for giving that response. I appreciate that. All right, our next item, Mr. Getchell, I'm imagining you're going to turn it right over to Mr. Lothhammer, but I'll give it to you for Starring Lake Park Building Concept Plan.
Yes, council members, Mr. Lothhammer has a presentation to provide before we ask that you take action on approving the authorization of a professional services agreement to move ahead with putting together design plans and specs for the Starring Lake Park building.
So, council members, you previously seen a contract with Dan O'Brien Architects for concept planning, and this is what has really come to fruition from that part of the project. And as Mr. Getchell said, the next step would be to move forward with plans and specifications that could be bid on, and then come back to the council with the results of those bids. So I want to show you some of the concepts. We did share this with the Parks Commission. If you remember back a year or so ago, we were talking about pickleball courts, and one of the reasons that we didn't move forward with this building was because we needed to think about funding sources at Starring Lake Park. And so we said, this should move a little bit forward, and let's do the courts and the pickleball at that point in time. Also, the staging of this project would be the parking lot that you're seeing a part of is in very, very bad condition. And we've been holding off on doing that because we knew we would have contractors in there doing earthwork over on the courts. We knew that then we would look to do the building, and so the very last part of the project would end up being the parking lot. So we'd kind of back our way out of this project with finishing the parking lot. So I guess to start you off too, this is what you're looking at today, and then we'll kind of superimpose what potentially could be looked at in the future. And this is a building that really serves multiple seasons. And so as we sat down and said, what has it been serving? What do we think it's going to serve in the future? And certainly the amount of use that the playground equipment is getting now with that being renovated, the amount of the pickleball use and tennis court use that's there, really the need for those open restrooms and good restrooms are even more needed now and into the future than what they have been in the past. This has been a well-used building. It is very old and very tired. If you go up and take a look at a lot of the wood, it's hit its useful life. In addition, we have some accessibility issues. It's just at the age where the doorways and the sizes of the restrooms don't meet code and don't meet handicap accessibility. So this is an opportunity to bring that back up to current modern day standards. It's also an ability to use this to support a lot of our winter use that happens. This is a pretty unique skating oval, but even more popular is our only sledding hill that we have in the community. And so you'll see that reflected both in how does it get used in the wintertime, and then how does it also get used in the summertime. This is kind of an overhead view. The aerial was done before the courts were in place, but you'll also see that if we superimpose it on this look, you're going to see where it is in relation to the courts and the sand volleyball court. Pretty tight site too. We've got some really high quality, significant oak trees that we are working on inside of them. There's no risk of having to take any of those trees down. We're able to fit that in terms of the layout of the building. It gets a little more linear than it was before, so you'll see the very left side of the building is more of that warming house for skating in the wintertime, support for summer playgrounds. The far right side ends up to be more of the meeting room and also the warming area for the sledding hill. I do think that what we have designed in terms of a meeting room look and feel to it, even more of the graduation parties and the 50th wedding anniversaries that are taking place there now, even more demand for that and an even better quality environment and experience. So this shows it a little more in kind of a summertime configuration where you get an idea of how many tables, chairs, benches can be put in place. The restrooms, similar to like a purgatory, we would look to have those open most of the time, so as the public is using it. You can also think of it as a good event space if there's a large pickleball tournament, as a good support facility. We've been seeing more 5K runs here and at Purgatory, but another place to be able to play host to some events like that. Breaks down a little bit by square footage and what some of the features and the amenities are. Again, because it's so open to the public, having really high visibility, because it's got such a great view and multiple great views, having a lot of windows and glass to look out and see the lake, and you'll see a couple of those renderings as I move forward that shows you how we can take advantage of that really nice view. It's kind of a quick roof line, how it lays out from above again. Looking at it from the south, the far right is really a picnic shelter, and as we would move forward in bidding, we'd likely have that as an alternate. The roof line has some overhangs. We're thinking about how can people go there and maybe be able to push a button like at a bus stop and get some infrared heating. So maybe if we don't have staff there, you as a parent could still get warmed up a little bit underneath the overhang, have some protection. So it's a little more of an available facility, even if we're not in a position to be staffing it. A couple other views. Haven't fully fleshed out what are those materials, but there are some brick and block glass intermixed in the design. This is what it would look like from the south looking to the north. And here is a kind of a rendering of if you were in that meeting room looking out over the lake. A little bit of a ski chalet feel to it. If you remember at the aquatic center, we have a counter that's out in a more controlled environment looking out into the pool, so parents that may not want to be in the pool environment. Same thing here, we're looking at a counter that would be towards the window, so in the wintertime you could still see out at the sledding hill. Summertime, maybe there's crock pots on top of it if you're having a family reunion. So the potential timeline that we're looking at, we did show this presentation to the Parks Commission about a week ago, got some feedback from them. Our presentation here tonight, if you elect to move forward, Mr. O'Brien would start working on the plans and specifications, which would take us to about January and February to bid out the project. We would come back with the results of the bid. If it were to move forward, begin construction in April and likely occupy by early November. So with that, any questions?
I've got
Council.
one. Is the large room for 80 people big enough?
You know, we have different rooms and facilities throughout the system. Even at the community center, there's multiple levels of rooms. When we think about just the overall site and what can fit on there, this pushes it to the side, that's about the largest size we could get on the site without disrupting some of the oak trees or the drainage. I think when we look at what happens, why people want to rent a Homeward Hills, park building there, the barn. This fits into our system pretty well. So I think if you're going to get higher, you're probably thinking about even the Cambria room or other larger amenities that we have, heritage rooms here. So
Though this has the view that none of the other ones have.
it's very nice, yeah.
I rented it this summer for an event, and it is kind of tired. So it's really due for an update. So I'm pleased to see that we're looking at making a change here.
Any other questions, comments? We do need a motion. Someone would like to make a motion?
Move to authorize entering into a professional services agreement with DSO Architecture for Starring Lake Parks building design plans and specifications.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, Mr. Lothammer. So now we've moving on to our next item. Mr. Getchell, I'll let you just intro it. Report of the Public Works Director, the Duck Lake Road improvements.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Major road improvement coming up here in the next year and a half is Duck Lake Road. And so our city engineer, Rod Rue, is going to walk through the layout. It's early in the process. You may recall this from previous construction projects, Preserve Boulevard, Eden Prairie Road, where we bring forward a layout to you and then ask for action to move forward with necessary property or easement acquisitions. But this is prior to developing plans and specifications and going out to bid. So Mr. Rue will be providing you with the presentation this evening.
As Rick mentioned, tonight we're going to be presenting the layout and asking for a resolution to approve the appraised values of the easements that we need for this layout. So to start, the project limits are, here's Duck Lake Trail. I don't know if you're seeing this. Duck Lake Trail, Duck Lake Road, high school down here, and Duck Lake Road divides the two water bodies there. And the project goes from Duck Lake Trail down to Mallard Court. So this section right here. I'll start on the layout from the kind of the north end. It's fairly typical city street. The existing road in this northern piece is a little narrower. We're going to continue that same dimension, 26 feet. Face to face. We're proposing a trail on the west side and a sidewalk on the east side. The sidewalk on the east side would go down to Padden Drive. And I'll talk about the gap here in a minute. The trail on the west side continues all the way down toward the school. Past Padden Drive. Here's the lake area. I don't know how well you can see the construction limits, but I have another graphic later to show you that. But so what we've done is we've looked through several alternatives through this section. Obviously, it's a very restricted area with water on both sides. We've looked at trying to continue the sidewalk and trail on both sides. Environmentally, it gets difficult. We had some internal discussions about how to lay the pedestrian and bicycle corridors out through here. And there was kind of consensus that because we wanted some continuity on the west side to access the elementary school. And I failed to bring up the fact that we did have some neighborhood meetings last year in June. We had a neighborhood meeting to present the corridor and kind of ask the neighbors for what type of issues they had or what type of problems they saw in this area. One of the things they mentioned was improving the pedestrian and bike facilities. As you know, right now this section of road is very narrow. There's no walking without walking on the road. The road is sloughed off. There's really no shoulders. They've asked for, they were concerned about the safety of kids, particularly kids and people walking to the school. They were concerned about the access to the school. As the students get dropped off and picked up, or the buses activities at the school, there's a lot of traffic and backups that occur in and out of the school. There's also a case where the storm sewer, or the culvert that's under the road here now, is fairly small. And so what happens is the west side fluctuates quite a bit more in a rain event, and has overtopped the road on several occasions. So as you can see in that overall, as you can see in the overall map, it's a fairly small area, so it tends to rise quickly. And there are some other drainage issues in the area that I'll mention in a minute as well. And so as the big side of the lake rises very small in comparison to the west side. And so that west side will overtop the road. With this project, we're proposing a larger culvert that will equalize the two water bodies, so that if it's using that storage on the big big side of the lake, and reduce the amount of flooding that occurs on the west side. Then after we had that meeting the neighborhood meeting in 2017, we developed this layout kind of through some discussions internally about where to put the trail, where to put the sidewalk, should there be one on both sides, what should the width of the road be, with the width of the trail, looked at a boardwalk, looked at many alternatives, probably 6 or 7 different alternatives, and kind of arrived at this one being that kind of met the needs of what we heard at the first neighborhood meeting. So in April of this year, we brought this layout to the residents, looking for their feedback. Very similar to this. There's a few small minor tweaks, but it was very similar to this. We had very good support from the neighborhood that they liked the plan, they liked the trail access, they liked the pedestrian access and bike access to the school. Kind of moving on down the road here with the layout. We've got the road widens a little bit. Once we get down by the school, we widen it a little bit. 30 feet wide. Once we get past the kind of the restricted area where the lake is. We've got a crosswalk. There'll be a crosswalk. There's currently a crosswalk right here on over to the school. We'll be adding a crosswalk again. The gap in the sidewalk is between South Shore Lane and Paddens Drive, and one of the reasons that sidewalk was not included is because we're trying to minimize the width of the impact on the two lake areas. We did pick up a sidewalk again from South Shore Lane down to the south. So basically there's a trail on one side, on the west side, a sidewalk on the east side, with the exception of through the lake area.
Right, I was out there and I'm forgetting, you said there's a crosswalk there now on the north side of South Shore Lane. What does it go to? Because is there a sidewalk on that north side right now?
It's kind of on the west side, there's partially it's a sidewalk, partially it's bituminous.
Remember that. But then make the turn and then, yep, right there. So what's right where your finger is? What's there now?
There's just a marked crosswalk, but there's no trail facility.
So the crosswalk goes to yard.
But it goes to the neighborhood so that they can access the school. Councilmember Case, you're correct. There are no ramps or sidewalks on the east side. It's simply a crosswalk.
Crosswalk just takes kids into basically the road, South Shore Lane in a way. I mean, it goes into grass, but yeah.
Right. Okay. So the sidewalk to the south will bring some of the traffic or pedestrian traffic that comes up from the south, as well as this neighborhood isn't going to be any different because they'll still cross at that same location. This sidewalk here will benefit people to the south.
But right now that neighborhood walks down grass to get to that crosswalk.
Or crosses the street further south, yes.
So should the crosswalk be on the other side, not even on that side?
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Yep.
What is that little yellow thing that looks like it's in just sort of an island?
This?
No, but cross towards the lake. It looks like there's just
right
a
there.
little piece of sidewalk there.
That's a driveway,
Oh,
the
okay.
home here, and it's a driveway access, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So then the road continues down just slightly past South Shore Lane and ends at Mallard Court with the road reconstruction. Again, the trail extends and the sidewalk extends further south down to the recently completed railroad crossing, pedestrian crossing for the over to the high school. Talk a little bit about the staging and schedule. So kind of going back to the crossing, this is obviously our most challenging area with the lake and water and there's poor soils there, obviously. So the biggest issue is right through here, constructability wise. So what we're proposing to do is surcharge this area. So basically putting soil on top of the, there's some underlying peat. It's about 3-4 feet deep, or thick I should say, but it's about 6 to 8 feet deep. So instead of digging it out, we're looking at surcharging it. So we add material over about 2 feet at a time over a period of about 3 months. Proposing to do that over the summer period next year. So after school's out, have it completed before school starts. There's 4 stages of that surcharge. The final surcharge actually goes over the entire road from about here to here. So we'll put a temporary surface on there and some ramps, and then over the winter, that surcharge for that whole section needs to be there for a minimum of 6 months, but it'll actually be there closer to 9 months because we'll basically leave it in place for the whole school year between fall of 19 to spring 20. And then in 2020, we'll remove the surcharge and build the bulk of the project, build the rest of the project.
Is that require mitigating wetland?
Yes.
Sorry. It does. Even though we remove it, we don't reconstitute the wetland.
Well,
we're covering it, right, with a trail.
There is some wetland mitigation. I believe it was like less than an acre, like 0.8 acres we're impacting.
Do we still have land out west that we're utilizing that we're party to, some land that we use to mitigate within the watershed?
Yes, we still do have that land, but the wetland mitigation for this project is being used out of the state's bank.
Oh, okay.
So that's a bank that's the state provides funding for. So on linear projects and street projects, you can use that bank.
Great.
So here is a graphic that shows the wetland impacts. And the different colors are just the different types of wetlands that are impacted. So there's a deep marsh, shallow marsh, and then a fresh meadow. Just different types of wetlands. So a total of 0.4 acres of wetland impacts, but we're mitigating 0.8.
2 to 1, yeah.
And then there's another portion of the project that's really not related to Duck Lake, other than it's a neighborhood issue that was identified during the neighborhood meetings that we're going to try to solve with this project. So it's kind of we're going to bid it with Duck Lake Road, but it'll be a separate improvement. So the backyards of these homes north of Padden Drive are very low relative to the lake level. Many times the water will sit in there for days because it's just there's so little elevation difference between this backyard and this water level, especially when it's high. So what we're doing is we're proposing a drain tile system in here. Basically going to be laid flat because there's no grade you can even get. You can't even create any grade, so it's just going to be laid flat. And then the culvert under here will be replaced. And then because of neutralization or the balancing of the water levels of those 2 lake lobes, the water here won't come up so much during those rain events. This is a little bit of a compensatory flood storage that we're losing, again, with the road widening. This is a project that was kind of asked for by the neighborhood, and I think they've appreciated that effort.
And we own that right away already, correct? Between the 2 yards?
We have a drainage and utility easement through there. We don't have.
That's correct. Thank you. I knew that.
Easement.
Thank you. Yep, but we have an easement, yeah.
And we'll work with the property owners to get, some rights of entry to get in there and do the work. It should be it's fairly shallow. It should be fairly easy work to do. Now, kind of the second part of this, before I get into that, I'll talk a little bit about the project costs. So the construction costs for this project as proposed or as shown is a little less than $2 million. When we add the engineering and some of the right-of-way costs and particularly a lot of the testing, we had to do quite a bit of soil borings and analysis. It's going to be probably closer to $2.7 million, which will be almost all state aid or with a little bit of stormwater utility money. So the other part of the action tonight, requesting a resolution to approve the appraised values for the easements that we need. There's currently 4 properties that we've identified that we're going to need right-of-way for, or easements. We've got, it's rather interesting, but this property here is actually about 80%, 90% water. This property owner owns that whole big rectangle. And then this property here is actually owned privately as well, but it's about 99% water. So we're purchasing easements from them, permanent easements. This is the school. We need an easement from the school. As noted here, we're doing this is a stormwater treatment facility, infiltration basin. We've talked to the school. It's going to be used. It's going to be used kind of an educational type component for kids as we look at vegetation and how we handle water and so forth. So, and then the last property that we've identified at this point is the most southerly property right before you get to the railroad crossing. I did hand out a packet of easement drawings that shows these easements. I'll just go through them rather quickly. This is the property that's by the lake. So this is Padden Drive is right here, Duck Lake, and this is the area that's got that large property that's got a water on most of it. The next one is the property to the south there, at the corner of Peterburg and Duck Lake. So again, we're obtaining the easements that we're encroaching upon with surcharge and grading. We're not purchasing the entire parcel. And then here's the easements needed from the school. We have a permanent easement for the pond and water treatment facility. And then there's some temporary easements along the boundary of the property to try to grade in adjacent to the trail. And then lastly, this is the property at the far south end, where we're extending the sidewalk down to that crossing of the pedestrian crossing at the railroad and into the high school area. So this one involves an easement here for the driveway. We need to, as we build that sidewalk, we need to replace their driveway because we're keeping the grade the same. We're just moving it back. It's about a 10% driveway now. We're keeping it at 10% and just have to move it back. And then there's a little bit of grading on the corner here to deal with the landscaping bermed area. And the next steps are, upon approval of the layout tonight and the resolution approving the appraised values, we'll begin easement acquisition. The final design is underway at this point. We'll be going through that process. The final design just started a month or two ago, so we'll be going through more of that. We'll be permitting, which will be a challenge through here to get permitting. We've had several meetings with the permitting agencies, and we're continuing to make those efforts. And then we plan to bid this in early spring of 19, and then as I talked about, some construction in the summer of 19 and the summer of 2020. So with that, if you have any questions.
Go ahead.
I have a number of questions, Mr. Rue. So if you go back to your big drawing, the scroll there, and look all the way at the north end of the project. So you have the intersection of Duck Lake Trail and Duck Lake Road. So if you look at the property on the that would be the southwest corner of that intersection. Yeah, let's see, is that?
North would be.
Yeah, right there, that property. So if you look at that property, if you see where the garage is in relationship to Duck Lake Road, there's not a very large distance between the garage and the Duck Lake Road. And so the resident there has a real concern that if we widen the road there, Duck Lake Road, and we put a trail across that driveway, that he really is left with nowhere to park vehicles. Currently, he's parking vehicles on that driveway, but he said, "What if the trail comes across there? Is he going to still be allowed to park his vehicles there?" He said that, when he has company over for Thanksgiving and holidays and things like that, he said it's really difficult to park on Duck Lake Trail because that's kind of a narrow road as well, and it's fairly busy. And so he's really just left with his driveway, and he's very concerned that if we run a trail across that driveway, he's really left with nothing there in terms of parking.
Yeah, it looks like that house might be
right there,
quite a bit closer than the normal setback, which probably means it was built a long time before that road was there.
Right.
So, I mean, we can look at and making some adjustments and figuring out that distance. And
well, if you look at that section, that happens to be where there is a city sidewalk on the other side of the street there already, an existing city sidewalk. And so his question was, do we really need a trail on that side of the road right there? Could we just leave that city sidewalk on the east side of of Duck Lake Road, in place, and just use that and not put the trail on the west side of Duck Lake Road?
Well, as far as we would like to see some continuity. The trail, there's sidewalks on both sides of Duck Lake Road going all the way up to County Road 62.
Okay.
So this kind of continues that with the before mentioned gap here. So we'll have at least some type of facilities on both sides. The benefit of having a bike trail is that it's multi-use. Sidewalks are typically just for pedestrians, whereas the trail is used for peds and bikes. We did make a kind of a conscious decision through some vetting of internally as well as with the consultant that came up with this being the best solution, is having the trail on the west side. Now that can change, but that was our recommendation.
Well, I would just suggest that we look at that corner a little bit more, look at his property, and work with them to find a solution that that's agreeable to him. Because right now, I mean, I can certainly see his concern. He's really going to be left with no parking area there at all. If he parks in his driveway, what is currently his driveway, he'll be covering up that trail.
Right. Well, we can look at, what obviously you'd like to have at least 19 feet, which is the depth of a parking stall. You'd like to have at least that between the garage and the trail. So if it's less than that, we can certainly look at making some adjustments. Maybe slide the trail over just in that section.
The other thing I wanted to comment on too was if you look at the so just south of Padden's Drive there, where you've got the small body of water on the west side, and you've got the larger body, Duck Lake, on the east side. So if you look right there, that section right there, if you're trying to build a trail through that section, there's a lot more water to cover on the west side than there is on the east side. So if you were to put that trail on the east side there, you have a lot less water to cross than if you'd cross on the west side. And so I was just wondering, what is the feasibility of locating that trail on the east side there?
Anything's possible. I think one of the reasons we chose this side, it's shallower on this side. The water depth is shallower. And
Okay.
I think there's less soil correction. I mean, there's peat on both sides.
Right.
But the depth of the water on this side is quite a bit more than this side. So you can see the construction limits go out quite a bit further on this side than they do on that side by the time we get to the toe of the slope underwater.
It's just that there's a lot less water, I think, to cross if you do it on the east side versus the west side.
Yeah, and we did look at that, I think, a little bit. And the other issue I think we had was this property here. Well, we don't know what kind of easements. We probably would need more easements along here. And I know we'd need more easements here because that's one of the areas we did look at when we were having a trail on both sides. Is this property goes up pretty rapidly off the road, and we'd be cutting back into this property quite a bit in some of these trees. So that was another consideration.
But I mean, could you keep it like to the east side just before it gets to Peterborg Road? Like right there, yeah, end it right there, and maybe even cross over there. So keep it on the east all the way down to just north of Peterborg, cross Duck Lake Road there, and just north of Peterborg.
So what were you considering up on that end then? To switch everything over?
Switch everything over. So currently you have a city sidewalk on the east side, south of Duck Lake Trail to the east of Duck Lake Road. It's a city sidewalk now. Maybe make that, if we were concerned that it's not pedestrian and bike friendly, make that into a trail, and then just continue it straight south, just north of Peterborg, and then if you need to cut across Duck Lake Trail, have a crossing there, and then extend it to the south on the west side.
This feels a little bit like whack-a-mole in that we're squeezing to try to help, which is really good. I appreciate that. Neighbors on one part, and we're going to impact neighbors on another part, because then there's neighbors on the south side that do not want it on the east side. They'd rather have it on the west side. And I think what I'd like to see maybe is to step back and think about, in the big picture, we got a school there, right, on the west side.
Right.
So I think what I'd almost prefer, if we're really, the best of all worlds would be for the good of all, the good of the whole city, realizing that there are negative impacts on individual people and homes sometimes, but for the good of all, the best is what we've done around the city, where we put a 6 to 8 foot bike trail on one side and a 5 foot concrete on the other. And we try to run that on busy thoroughfares across the whole city. I understand completely in this isthmus that that's counterproductive for multiple reasons: environment, the cost. But what I'd like to see, I think, is that because the school's on the west side, that we concentrate on the west side. I know that negatively impacts the neighbors up on Duck Lake Trail and Duck Lake Road on that corner, right? And so I'd like to try to mitigate that the best that we can, if we can squeeze that toward the road, whatever. But I think that bike trail and that large walking, biking, pedestrian trail, because it's on the school side, should go down the west side. I do have questions on the sidewalk on the east side then when you go down toward the railroad track, because then you've got sidewalk, no sidewalk, sidewalk, no side, and crosswalks some places. I think I'd almost rather push people to the west side, push kids to the west side as a safer route to get them to school. And then down at the railroad crossing where we built an incredibly fancy crossing, which I hope high school kids will take the time to
and not go around it.
to meander. But nonetheless, the point is we've led them to that point, and we've got a beautiful crosswalk coming over from the west side. And now we're talking about, well, let's keep some kids on the east side, and but not over here. I'm almost taking the opposite issue than you and say, if we're going to have to pick one, let's push everyone to the west for the safety of kids, is what I would say. Kathy, do you have any thoughts there?
Well, I think it is good to keep it towards the school and everything, but we have one property owner that's going to need some help somehow.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
whether that's that we take a driveway out to the other Duck Lake and don't force them to change their address, which would be a real pain. They need to be able to do something to utilize their driveway and to be able to have guests. They have that now, we're going to take that away, so we have to do something to mitigate that. And it even impacts the value of their home and everything else if they don't have that. The question is what can we do? Because there are 2 streets going along that property. And, but I know there are some impacts when you change your driveway to another street on your whole address. And that causes issues for people. I would like to know what we can do for them.
Well, we can look at the situation a little more closely. This is the layout stage. As we get into design, we can look and try to get that dimension nailed down, get on the property and find out exactly where that garage door is, what that distance is back. Presumably you want at least 19 feet. If we need to slide this in a little closer to the road and for a short period, that might be a solution. I did want to point out, looking at, you can see this, I'm not sure you can see it on your drawing, but if you do put it on this other side, the dotted line there, the series of dots is the construction limits. And you can kind of see that we're hugging right on the property line on this side. So if we do widen and put a trail on this side, we're going to impact these 3 properties with easements. Right now, all the improvements in this area are within the existing right-of-way. And as I mentioned, the only ones we're looking at easements are the 4 identified earlier. The 2 by the lake, school, and the south property. So.
Go down and look at the one on the south that's right next to the railroad crossing walkway. And just talk to me again about the sidewalk, why that makes sense to staff to have it on the east side right there when we really want to try to move people to the west side.
I think the rationale I believe we had kind of talked about was trying to get a facility on both sides of the road, like we typically do on some of our more collector roads. Knowing that we had a gap in the middle, but presumably maybe someday that gap could be filled with a bridge or a boardwalk or something to that side to continue that. The other issue I know we've talked about with some of the park staff is maintenance. If we have a trail, we're able to maintain that lot easier than we can a sidewalk, particularly because some of the sidewalks aren't always maintained by the city; they're maintained by the property owners. In a case by the school, that might be a policy decision that we would choose differently. But the trail provides us to maintain that snow removal and so forth with our pickups.
And Councilmember Kays, if I may, I know when we were doing the analysis for the railroad crossing, we were doing counts of students walking to and from school. And believe it or not, we saw we saw a handful of elementary school students that were coming from presumably south of Valley View, who were crossing the railroad tracks going to Prairie View. So there are a small percentage of students who do walk. And I think some of the rationale with the sidewalk on the east side is that they would now be able to cross the track safely, stay on that side of the road, because that's not the best crossing that we have out there that was currently put in around the curve. But if you could have a sidewalk on the east side, you could take them up to Prairie View's entrance, where there is a crossing guard who helps the kids get to and from. So I think that was some of the rationale. And quite frankly, the other part of the whole decision to have facilities on both sides, at least where we could, this is one of those few roads in Eden Prairie that actually has some connectivity and goes somewhere. It goes from Crosstown on our northern border and, well into Minnetonka and then down to Valley View. So we thought this is, one of those roads where we have a chance to do a complete street. Well, it's one of our Green Step Cities programs, and to put facilities for walkers, bikers, and drivers. So I think that went into a lot of the decision making about what type of a road should we build here, because we get one chance and we're probably not going to be back for another 50 years. So
I realize, I hear that, so thank you, and I agree. So thinking of that idea, though, about a sidewalk and not having it in two sections, mainly because of the deep water on the east side of the lake, but is this an opportunity then, and I realize it's a lot of money, I don't even know, $100,000, but to put a wooden boardwalk bridge type concept on the east side, do your major bike trail on the west side and go ahead and recharge the ground or whatever, but this might be an opportunity to force in a sidewalk all the way up and down on that east side. So talk to me about, if we value the sidewalk, then why don't we really value the sidewalk?
Yeah, I think that there are other agencies that are going to want to weigh in on that, and they're looking at minimizing impacts to water, which is, something that we
That's
share.
why I mentioned like a bridge or like a walkway, a wooden boardwalk.
And that might be an option. We can visit with them about that. I think our parks people might tell us that is a very difficult facility to maintain in the winter. So it might be a type of facility that doesn't get plowed in the winter, so it has partial year usage. And there might be some additional costs with that too. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I haven't costed that out, but there are a couple other hoops where other agencies might have something to say about that. But yeah, I think this, when we started this project, the idea was, can we get facilities on both sides and what makes sense?
Okay.
May I add?
Sure.
We did, as part of our alternatives analysis that we did and looking at different alternatives, we did cost out that pedestrian boardwalk on the east side, and I can't remember the number exactly, but it was in the $600,000-$700,000 range.
A little bit more than my 100,000?
Only 6 or 7 times.
Times. All right, well, thank you for that. So let's think about where we're at here. This is giving a layout approval to proceed. What kind of detail can be left open, I guess, is what I'm asking, so that we can take a vote tonight and still have flexibility going forward.
Yes, Councilmember Case, to answer that question, I think what we're looking for is an affirmation that you like the road dimensions. We're not talking about adding a third lane or anything like that, and that you do agree with the facilities that are being proposed in their location. So the trail and the sidewalk as proposed is how we would move forward. There is still the opportunity to tweak things if we can work with the property owner in the southwest quadrant and move that trail a little bit closer to the road so he's got more driveway to park 3 or 4 vehicles in there. We can look at, do we expand the driveway a little bit here or there to make reasonable accommodations? Those things are on the table and flexible. But tonight, we really do need to know, do you agree with that layout, the trails and the sidewalks where they're being proposed? So if you don't, you need to let us know, because then those things would be eliminated from the project. If the vote is to affirm that, then we would move forward with the property owners that this is the final layout we're looking at. And again, tweaks can be made. You can jockey the road a foot or 2 here, but.
I have questions about the sidewalk on the southeastmost corner, but I don't want it to hold up tonight. And it seems like even something that could in and of itself be tweaked maybe, but in general, I'm fine. I'm fine with the bike trail on the west side. I want to mitigate as best we can the homeowner that's most impacted up north. Definitely fine with the road. The rest of you weigh in, and could you take the vote tonight to give preliminary approval?
Just barely. I almost would like to include in the motion, though, that they do look very carefully at that one homeowner that's losing their current driveway space. I think you have to do some things for the good of everyone, but you can't leave someone without usable space for their home.
Agreed.
And I don't know if the attorney wants wording, or you just want this wording with, verbal counsel intent, or how you want to move with that. But I do want to see something so that there's some room for dealing with that issue.
Councilmember Nelson, I understand that to mean that we would work with them to establish a usable driveway, which in my mind is parking for 3, perhaps 4 vehicles. I guess that's how I would walk away from this meeting if that is the intention.
3 to 4 vehicles may not be enough for them. I'm guessing.
What do they have now?
They happen to be here tonight, and I don't know if they would be, if we want to open it up to just asking them if they would like to speak on it.
I would be fine with that. I wonder, though, if it wouldn't be better to put it in our condition that staff will go away and work with them.
And that's fine too. I mean, I just think that we need to be mindful of them and just work with them and come to a resolution.
I'm thinking, though, in projects that we have like this across the city, that we typically will trust staff to go back, and then we'll know that our conditions were set forth and staff heard that. Yep. And they'll go back and work with these people. Is that okay? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I think that's fine as long as we direct staff to come to a reasonable resolution with the residents. That's good.
Then I believe we're ready for a motion if one of you are ready to make it.
I'll make it. I would move to approve the layout dated September 11th, 2018 and adopt a resolution approving the appraisal values for the property acquisitions for the Duck Lake Road Improvement City Project number IC 17-5983, the project, and authorizing the city attorney and city engineer to acquire the properties for the project by direct negotiation or condemnation.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. JD, we have an item here, report of police chief and report of fire chief. Either of you want to, JD, for your last time, take advantage of that? You haven't for 3 years, but I thought you might want to tonight. Not that we needed you for the last 3 years to do that. You've spoken well when we needed you. Thank you for your service. We really appreciate your time here. Yes.
And I'm glad we surprised you.
Is there any other business to come before the council this evening, Mr. Getchell?
No.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.